The cowboy's baby cried all night until the woman next door crossed the fence. Winter came early that year, the kind that didn't ask permission. It just arrived, quiet, heavy, and absolute. Snow settled into the seams of the Wyoming plains like it intended to stay forever. Fence posts wore white caps. The wind moved low and constant, whispering through dead grass and rattling loose boards like a warning that never finished its sentence. Nights stretched longer than men remembered, and loneliness thickened the way cold did, slow, invisible, and hard to fight. Ethan Cole hadn't slept in 3 nights. The baby's cry cut through the dark again, thin, sharp, desperate. It rose from the small house like smoke from a bad fire, drifting across the frozen yard, slipping through the cracks in Ethan's chest where warmth used to live. He sat at the kitchen table, elbows braced, head bowed, counting the seconds between cries like they meant something. Like if he counted right, the sound would stop. It didn't. The lamp flickered, shadows shook on the walls. The bottle in his hand was warm, freshly boiled, mixed wrong again, too thin, too thick. He didn't know anymore. His hands that could rope a steer in wind, hands that had buried his wife in frozen ground 6 weeks earlier, trembled now over a crying child he couldn't quiet. "Easy, son," he whispered, voice hoarse and unsure. "I got you. I'm here." The baby didn't care. The cry climbed higher, turning raw, angry, a sound too big for something so small. Ethan stood, pacing the narrow room, boots thudding softly against warped floorboards. He tried rocking, singing, badly. Tried walking the length of the house like motion might trick the night into mercy. Nothing worked. Outside, the wind pressed against the walls, and somewhere beyond the fence line, a light flickered on. Ethan didn't notice. He was too busy fighting the weight of failure settling in his bones. He hadn't meant to become this man. Hadn't meant to stand alone in a cold house with a crying newborn and no idea what came next. Mary had always known what to do. She had known how to calm a room, how to soften hard edges, how to look at Ethan like he was more than a man carved by dust and duty. When the doctor said she wouldn't survive the birth, she had smiled anyway. Weak, brave, final. "Promise me," she had whispered, hand tight around his. "Promise you'll stay." He promised. Now the baby cried, like it knew that promise was hanging by a thread. Ethan lowered himself into the chair again, exhaustion pressing down like snow on a sagging roof. The cry didn't stop. It only changed. Less sharp now, more broken. That was worse. He pressed his palm to his eyes, breathing slow, steady, the way he did before storms. That's when he heard it. A knock, soft, careful, like whoever stood on the porch already knew they weren't welcome. Ethan froze. No one came out here in winter, not unless they had to. He stood slowly, the baby's cries filling the space between heartbeats. The knock came again, 3 taps, gentle but sure. He crossed the room, opened the door. Cold rushed in, sharp and alive. And there she stood, Clara Bennett, the woman next door, if next door meant half a mile across snow and fence and silence. She wore a thick wool coat, dark hair tucked into a scarf, cheeks red from the cold. Snow dusted her boots. Her eyes, steady, brown, unreadable, met his without flinching. "I heard the baby," she said simply. Ethan didn't answer. He hadn't spoken to her in months, not since Mary's funeral, not since grief turned the world inward and made neighbors feel like strangers again. The baby cried harder, as if sensing the open door. Clara glanced past Ethan into the dim house. Her expression shifted, not pity, not judgment, something quieter, something firmer. "You look like you're drowning," she said. That stung, because it was true. "I don't need help," Ethan said automatically, the words stiff and practiced. She nodded once, as if she expected that answer. "You don't have to need it," she replied. "You just have to take it." The wind cut between them. Snow swirled low across the porch. Behind Ethan, the cry broke into hiccuping sobs. Clara stepped forward, not fast, not hesitant, just enough to cross an invisible line. "I raised my sister's boys," she said. 3 of them, in winters worse than this. Ethan hesitated. Pride rose up, stubborn, useless. but exhaustion crushed it just as quickly. He stepped aside. Clara entered the house, the warmth folding around her like it recognized something familiar. She shrugged off her coat, moved without asking, without rushing. The baby's cries faltered as she approached, as if curiosity interrupted despair. She took the bottle from Ethan's hand, tested it against her wrist, adjusted it without comment. Then she lifted the baby, sure, practiced, calm. The crying stopped, not all at once, not like magic. It softened, slowed, faded into quiet, uneven breaths. Ethan stood there, stunned, watching a stranger do what he couldn't. Clara rocked gently, humming low, no words, just sound. The baby's tiny fingers curled into her coat, trusting without question. Silence settled into the room for the first time in days. Ethan swallowed hard. Outside, winter pressed close. Inside, something shifted. The quiet didn't feel real at first. Ethan stood where he was, hands empty, arms aching with a phantom weight, listening to the small, uneven breaths coming from his son's chest as Clara rocked him near the stove. The fire cracked low, throwing amber light across her face. She hadn't asked the baby's name. She hadn't asked Ethan anything at all. She just handled it, like the night had finally met someone who knew how to speak its language. "You can sit," she said softly without looking up. "He likes steady sounds. Chairs creak. That helps." Ethan obeyed without thinking, lowering himself into the chair like his knees might give out if he didn't. The wood complained under his weight. The baby shifted, sighed, but didn't wake. Clara adjusted her hold, tucking the child closer, her movements economical and calm. She didn't smile, didn't frown. She treated the moment the way ranchers treated weather, serious, respectful, aware it could turn on you without warning. "How old?" she asked. 3 weeks, Ethan said. His voice sounded strange to him, rusted, unused. "Born during the first snow." Clara nodded. "Winter babies cry more. Cold gets in their bones early." Ethan watched her, the way her shoulders moved when she breathed, the way she didn't hover or panic, just existed in the space like she belonged there. "She was good at this," he said suddenly. Clara looked up, eyes steady. "Your wife?" He nodded. The word wife still felt sharp, like touching ice with bare skin. "She could quiet a room just by standing in it," he went on. "Could calm a horse. Calm me. I thought I'd learn by watching her." Clara looked back down at the baby. "Watching isn't the same as doing." "No," Ethan agreed. "It isn't." The silence stretched again, but this time it didn't bite. After a while, Clara eased the baby into the cradle by the hearth. The child stirred, mouth puckering, then settled. She tucked the blanket just so, then straightened. "You have coffee?" she asked. Ethan blinked. "Yeah, probably burnt." "That's fine." He poured it anyway, hands steadier now. They sat across from each other at the table, steam curling between them. Outside, the wind scraped along the walls like it was listening. Clara warmed her hands on the mug. "You haven't been sleeping." It wasn't a question. Ethan stared into his cup. "Every time he cries, I think—" He stopped, swallowed. "I think I'm failing her. Again." Clara didn't interrupt. She waited. That was her way. "I promised Mary I'd stay," he said. "Promised I'd be enough." Clara's gaze softened, not with pity, but recognition. "You stayed," she said. "That counts for something." "Does it?" His voice cracked. "Because most nights it feels like the house is empty anyway." She leaned back slightly, studying him. "Grief doesn't leave when people die," she said. "It just changes shape. Sometimes it cries all night." Ethan let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. They sat like that for a while. The clock ticked, the fire shifted, the baby slept. Finally, Clara stood. "I can come by tomorrow," she said. "Help you get a routine. Babies like routines. Men do too, whether they admit it or not." Ethan hesitated. Old instincts flared, self-reliance, distance, the habit of surviving alone. But then the baby stirred again, made a small sound, and the fear returned just as quickly. "I'd appreciate that," he said. Clara nodded once. She pulled on her coat, wrapped her scarf tight. At the door she paused. "Ethan?" "Yes?" "You're not failing," she said quietly. "You're learning in the hardest season there is." Then she stepped back into the night, crossed the yard, and disappeared beyond the fence. She came back the next morning, and the next. Winter tightened its grip, but Clara moved through it like she'd made peace with cold a long time ago. She taught Ethan how to warm bottles properly, how to read the difference between hunger and fear, how to let the baby cry sometimes without letting it break him. She didn't stay long, never overstepped, just enough. The neighbors noticed. Whispers followed Clara into town, a widow helping a widower, a woman crossing fences uninvited. Ethan heard none of it. He was too busy learning how to breathe again. One afternoon, while snow fell thick and heavy, Clara paused at the door. "You should name him," she said. Ethan looked at the sleeping child. "I thought Mary would—" "She did," Clara said gently. "She just didn't say it out loud." Ethan swallowed. "Thomas," he said after a moment. "After her father." Clara smiled then, just a little. That night, Thomas slept for 4 straight hours. Ethan cried for the first time since the funeral. And somewhere between the quiet and the snow, the fence between 2 lonely houses stopped feeling like a border and started feeling like a bridge. Winter deepened after that, not with drama, not with storms that announced themselves loud and proud, but with accumulation. Snow layered over snow until the land forgot its own shape. Days shortened, nights grew heavier. The sky stayed the color of old tin, and the sun felt like a rumor. Ethan learned the sound of Thomas's breathing, the way he once learned the moods of cattle. The small huffs when the baby dreamed, the soft wheeze when he needed turning, the sharp intake before a cry that meant hunger, not fear. It didn't come all at once. It came slowly, in fragments, stitched together by long nights and shorter patience. Clara kept coming. Sometimes in the morning, sometimes near dusk, sometimes only long enough to check on the baby and leave a jar of soup warming by the stove. She never made it feel like charity, never lingered when Ethan looked tired, never acted like the house belonged to her. But somehow, with her in it, the house felt less hollow. One afternoon the snow fell so thick it erased the fence line. Ethan stood at the window watching the world vanish inch by inch. Thomas slept in his arms, heavier now, warmer. Clara sat at the table mending a small shirt with quick, practiced stitches. "You ever miss it?" Ethan asked suddenly. Clara didn't look up. "Miss what?" "Living alone," he said, "before everything got complicated." Her needle paused, just for a breath. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But loneliness isn't the same as peace. People confuse the two." Ethan nodded. He understood that better now. She tied off the thread, held up the shirt, inspected it. "He'll grow into it, faster than you think." "That's what scares me," Ethan said. "Feels like if I blink, I'll miss it." Clara smiled faintly. "You will miss some of it. That's not failure, that's being human." The baby stirred, eyes fluttering open. His gaze drifted unfocused across the room, then landed on Clara. His mouth curved, just barely, not quite a smile, but something close. Clara froze. "Did you see that?" she asked, quiet as a secret. Ethan looked down. "What?" She laughed under her breath. "Never mind. First almost smiles are selfish. They don't repeat for witnesses." That night, after Clara left, Ethan sat alone by the fire with Thomas asleep against his chest. The house felt different when she was gone, not empty exactly, but quieter in a way that echoed. He told himself it was just exhaustion, just gratitude, just winter making men sentimental. Still, when the wind rattled the shutters, he wished she were there to hear it with him. The trouble started on a Wednesday. Ethan noticed the tracks first, boot prints near the fence line, half filled with snow, but fresh enough to matter. Not Clara's, larger. He followed them with his eyes until they disappeared toward the road. That evening in town, the looks lingered longer than usual. Conversations hushed when he entered the store. Old men paused mid-sentence. A woman he barely knew turned her shoulder away like she'd been burned. At the counter, the clerk cleared his throat. "Heard you got help these days." Ethan met his gaze. "I do." The man shifted. People talk. They always do. That night, when Clara came by, Ethan told her. She didn't look surprised. I wondered how long it'd take, she said, hanging her coat. You don't have to keep coming, he said quickly. I don't want... She raised a hand. I know, and I will, but not because they talk. She moved closer, lowering her voice. They'll say worse soon. About me. About you. About why I crossed that fence. Ethan felt something hot flare in his chest. Let them. Clara studied him, searching. You sure? He nodded. I buried my wife in this ground. Anyone with sense knows that. Anyone without isn't worth my breath. A beat passed. Then Clara said quietly, You don't owe me defense. I know, he replied. I want to give it. Something shifted between them then, not sudden, not dramatic, just a line redrawn. A storm rolled in 2 days later, the kind that swallowed sound and direction. Snow fell sideways, piling against the house, sealing the world shut. Ethan barely noticed until the door rattled hard, once, twice. He opened it to find Clara soaked through, hair loose, eyes wide. My roof caved, she said. The back room. I tried to shore it, but... Come in, Ethan said, already stepping aside. They spent the night together, not like lovers, not like strangers, like two people stranded by the same weather. Clara slept on the cot, Ethan on the chair by the cradle. The fire burned low and steady. At some point in the night, Thomas cried. Ethan stirred, exhausted. Before he could stand, Clara was already there, lifting the baby, whispering soft nonsense. The crying faded. Ethan watched her in the firelight. You're good at this, he said. She smiled tiredly. So are you. He shook his head. I don't feel like it. No one does, she replied. That's how you know it matters. The storm raged outside, but inside the house held. By morning, the world was buried. They worked together without talking much, clearing drifts, checking the animals, fixing what could be fixed. Clara stayed. Not because she had nowhere else to go, though she didn't, but because leaving felt wrong. That afternoon, while Ethan shoveled near the fence, Clara stood watching from the porch, Thomas bundled against her chest. An older man rode up slow, hoarse snorting steam. He tipped his hat stiffly. Morning, he said. Didn't expect company. Ethan straightened. Weather makes its own rules. The man's gaze slid to Clara, then to the baby, then back to Ethan. Careful, he said. People are watching. Ethan didn't flinch. Let them. The man studied him, then nodded once and rode on. Clara exhaled slowly. You okay? Ethan asked. She nodded. I've lived with worse than watching. That night, after Thomas finally slept, Clara stood at the door, coat in hand. I should go check the house, she said. Ethan hesitated. The words rose before he could stop them. You could stay. She met his eyes. You sure? He nodded. I am. She stepped back inside. Outside, winter pressed hard. Inside, two lonely lives leaned just a little closer together, careful, uncertain, but no longer alone. Winter didn't loosen its grip after that night. If anything, it tightened, like it sensed something fragile taking shape and meant to test it. The cold grew sharper, more deliberate. Snowstorms came in waves, burying tracks, erasing proof that anyone lived out there at all. Clara stayed. At first it was practical. Her roof needed time. The roads were dangerous. Thomas needed consistency. Those reasons stacked neatly, sensible and solid. But after a while the reasons stopped being spoken. She slept on the cot, then later on the other side of the bed, fully dressed, careful, a respectful distance between them, like a line neither dared cross without naming. Ethan lay awake some nights listening to her breathing, steady and real, grounding him in a way sleep never could. The baby learned her scent, calmed faster in her arms. Ethan watched it happen with something like awe and something like fear. One evening, as the fire burned low and Thomas slept, Clara sat on the floor sorting dried beans. Ethan mended tack at the table. You ever think about leaving? She asked quietly. Ethan didn't look up. This land? This place, she clarified. This life. He paused, considered. I used to, he said, before Mary, thought the world was bigger somewhere else. And now? He glanced toward the cradle. Now I think the world got smaller, or maybe clearer. Clara nodded. I never had that. A place? He asked. A promise, she replied. The words settled between them. The talk came sooner than either expected. It happened in town, during a rare clear day when the sky opened blue and brittle, and the snow glittered like it was hiding something sharp underneath. Ethan had Thomas bundled against his chest, Clara walking beside him. Heads turned. Whispers followed. A man stepped into their path. One Ethan recognized. Mr. Harlan, church elder, widower himself. This isn't proper, Harlan said, not unkindly, but firm. Ethan stopped. Clara tensed beside him. What isn't? Ethan asked. A woman living with you, unmarried, with a child in the house. Ethan's jaw tightened. The child is mine. That's not what people are saying, Harlan replied. Clara inhaled sharply. Ethan felt it beside him, like a held breath pressed against his ribs. They're saying she's replacing your wife, Harlan continued. That grief has made you careless. Ethan looked him straight in the eye. Grief made me human, he said. Careless would be letting a baby starve because I was too proud to accept help. Harlan studied him, then sighed. People fear what doesn't fit. Then they'll have to learn, Ethan replied. They walked on. Clara didn't speak until they were well clear of town. I never wanted to cause trouble, she said quietly. Ethan stopped, turned to her. You didn't. But I am. No, he said firmly. You're revealing it. She searched his face, eyes bright with something unshed. What if this costs you? It already did, he said. When Mary died. Everything after is just living. That night Clara stood at the window long after Thomas slept. Maybe I should go back once the roof's fixed, she said softly. Give them time. Ethan felt the words like a fist closing around something tender. If that's what you want, he said carefully. She turned. What do you want? The question hung there, heavy, honest, unavoidable. Ethan set down the cup in his hand. His voice was quiet but steady. I want you to stay, he said. Not as help, not as charity, as choice. Clara's breath hitched. And if I do, she asked, what does that make us? He took a step closer, not touching, just close enough for warmth to pass. It makes us people trying, he said, in winter. Her eyes filled then, not spilling, just shining. She nodded once. All right. They crossed the line that night, not with urgency, not with fire, with quiet. Ethan reached for her hand first. Clara didn't pull away. Their touch was hesitant, reverent, like both were afraid of breaking something already cracked, but healing. They didn't rush. The world outside stayed cold and hard, but inside the room something softened. When they lay together afterward, no words were needed. The fire crackled low. The baby slept. For the first time since Mary died, Ethan felt something like peace, fragile, unguaranteed, but real. The consequences came anyway. A letter arrived 2 weeks later. Formal, cold, from the church committee, concern, morality, reputation. Clara read it in silence. I'll go, she said simply, folding it, before they force your hand. Ethan shook his head. No. This land is yours, she said. Your child needs stability. So do I, he replied. And I'm done pretending that means being alone. She studied him, long and hard. They won't stop. Then we won't bend. They buried the letter under the firewood. Winter began to break in small, stubborn ways. Snow melted at the edges. Days lengthened by minutes. Thomas laughed for the first time, a startled, breathless sound that made Clara clap a hand over her mouth and Ethan laugh until his eyes burned. Neighbors adjusted, slowly, reluctantly. Some never did, but the fence stayed where it was, no longer a boundary, just a line in the snow no one paid much attention to anymore. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky burned pink and gold, Clara stood on the porch holding Thomas. Ethan came up behind her, rested his chin lightly on her shoulder. "We'll never be what they expect," she said. "No," he agreed, "but we'll be honest." She leaned back into him. Inside, the house held warmth. Outside, winter loosened its grip, not because it was done, but because it had tested them and found they would not break. Spring didn't arrive all at once. It came the way healing always did, quietly, unevenly, with setbacks that made you question whether it was real at all. Snow lingered in the shadows long after the sun softened. The ground stayed hard beneath the thaw, resisting change like it had been burned before. But life moved anyway. Thomas learned to hold his head up, then to laugh without surprise. His cries, once sharp and endless, softened into complaints that passed quickly when answered. Ethan learned to answer them without panic, without the sense that every sound was a test he was failing. Clara watched this from the edges, pride hidden behind practicality. One afternoon, while Ethan repaired a gate loosened by frost, Clara stood nearby with Thomas bundled against her shoulder. The baby reached out, fingers closing around Ethan's collar when he leaned close. "Looks like he's chosen you," Clara said. Ethan smiled faintly. "I'm trying to earn it." "You already have," she replied. They stood there for a long moment, three figures against an opening sky. The fence behind them half buried, half forgotten. The real test came with the visit. It was late March when the wagon rolled in from town, two men inside, coats stiff with authority, faces set in practiced concern. Ethan recognized one as the county registrar, the other didn't introduce himself. They spoke politely. That was the worst part. Concerns had been raised, questions asked, a household under scrutiny, a woman residing with a widower, a child involved. Clara listened from the doorway, face calm, hands steady. Ethan answered every question without raising his voice. Yes, she lived there. Yes, she helped. Yes, she stayed. "And do you intend to make this arrangement permanent?" the registrar asked. Ethan didn't hesitate. "Yes." The man glanced at Clara. "Marriage?" Clara's breath caught, but she didn't look away. Ethan turned to her then, not to ask permission, to offer truth. "Yes," he said. The men left soon after. No promises, no threats, just the sense of being measured against something older than fairness. That night, Clara sat by the fire long after Thomas slept. "You didn't ask me," she said quietly. Ethan joined her. "I didn't want to put you on the spot." She nodded. "I know." A pause. "And?" he asked. She looked up at him, eyes steady. "Ask me now." He took her hand, warm, familiar, no longer uncertain. "Will you stay?" he asked. "Not just through winter, through everything." She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "Yes." They married in April. No church bells, no crowd, just a justice of the peace, a borrowed suit, and Thomas asleep through the whole thing. Clara wore a simple dress, mended at the seams. Ethan's hands shook when he placed the ring, Mary's ring, resized, offered with reverence, not replacement. At the end, Clara rested her hand over Thomas's heart and then over Ethan's. "This," she said softly, "is enough." Some people came around after that. Others never did. It mattered less than Ethan once thought. Years passed. The fence weathered. The house grew louder. Thomas took his first steps in the dirt yard, fell, cried, got up again. Clara laughed more easily. Ethan learned to, too. They spoke of Mary sometimes, not with pain, but with honesty. Clara never flinched at her name, never tried to erase her. She understood that love didn't divide, it layered. Winter returned each year, but it never felt quite as cruel. Because now, when nights grew long and cold pressed against the walls, there were hands to reach for, voices to answer cries, light that stayed on. One night, much later when Thomas was nearly grown, a storm rolled in sudden and sharp. The wind howled, snow hit the windows hard. Ethan woke to a cry, not from a baby, but from memory. Clara stirred beside him. "He's fine," she murmured, already knowing. Ethan nodded. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, Clara took his hand. "You remember that first winter?" she asked softly. He smiled. "I remember thinking I couldn't survive it." She squeezed his fingers. "You did?" "No," he said gently. "We did." The wind battered the house, but it held, and somewhere beyond the fence, the world kept moving, unaware of the quiet truth forged inside a small home during a long winter, that sometimes all it took to change everything was a woman willing to cross a fence and a man willing to open the door.